Okay, so this would be a recording to show you how to generate the variations for the questions from beginning to end. Okay, so first, let me show you my screen. One sec. Right. Before we do anything, we need to clone the Git repo, right? Um, I need to first create a folder. I create a folder called clone. This is basically where you want to store or the destination of the Git repository. So once I'm in the destination that I want, I would open a new terminal and then I run git clone, and that would clone the code repository, as you can see this folder here, to the destination. Right. So the next step is you want to open NUI scraper folder. You should see a lot of files here. And then the next step is go to that NUI scraper folder. And the way to do that is using this command. This would change the working directory from clone to NUI scraper. But if you already see NUI scraper instead of clone on your terminal, then you don't need this step. The reason why we need to go to the directory of NUI scraper is because clone doesn't have Git. This folder clone here has nothing. So NUMI scraper is the folder that has Git. That's why you can use Git only when you're in NUMI scraper directory. Okay, then the next step is we want to create a branch for the grade that we're working with. So let's say I want to generate variations for grade 8, right? So I will do git checkout -b extents. Checkout -b grade 8 origin / grade 8. Okay, so you should see this message that switch to new branch grade 8 and grade 8 is set up to track origin grade 8. Okay. Next step is to launch Claude. Right. If you haven't got your Claude set up, like sign-in credentials and setting up the agents, you can watch the recordings of the QA training session that Nina recorded. But for today's demo, I would skip that step and go straight to the process of generating the variations. So what I do is I create another file called file.json. This is where I will dump batch of exercise that I want to generate the variations of. So for example, let's say I want to generate from week 10, week 10 E1 until the end of week 13. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so 14E1, we don't want to include 14E1, we just want from week 10 all the way to week 13 inclusively. So you would copy and then you paste it into file.json. You can have the square brackets or not, but I personally like to have the square brackets in here. just because then VS Code would not raise any error. Like if you paste without the square brackets, you see how it's red here and then it says there's a problem. This has to do with like the formatting of JSON files. It wouldn't affect the variation, the process of generating the variations, but I like to have square brackets just so I don't have any problems. Okay. And then once you dump your batch of exercise in this file of JSON, then you can select everything. Claude is already launched, right? So you can run math question variation generator agent on, you can specify the file name here or you don't, doesn't matter because Claude also tracks your which file you're in right now. So you see how it says 771 lines selected. It knows that I'm currently looking at file.json. But I'm just gonna specify the name and file.json, then run math variation quality checker agent to check for issues. Okay, now you sit back and then you let Claude does its thing. In the meantime, if you want to boost productivity, what you can do is you go to the same file that you're assigned, uh, and you select the next batch of exercise. So let's say this time I want to go from 14 to the end of 17. Yeah. 17, 17E4. Here, 17E4. Yep, there we go. Now I'm going to create another file called file2.json. Square brackets, paste it in there, and save it. Okay. Now you will see that Claude will obviously prompt you very often for permissions to run certain actions, execute certain commands. And just hit enter, let it do its thing. And then for the file2.json that I just created, I can now open another terminal. Extend this here. Open another terminal, right? You can either do this plus sign or you can do new terminal here. And then you launch Claude again. Yes. And then you will select JSON here, select everything, and process, math question, variation, generator agent on this file, on file2.json. And you can repeat the same process and have as many terminals open as you feel comfortable because you would have to switch between the terminals to allow Claude. For example, here, you see when I switch back to my original terminal, Claude is asking me for permission to generate this Python script. So I can also move the arrows up and down to pick different options. If I want Claude to autopilot as much as possible, I would move it down to option 2. Yes, for this session only. And then here, yep, the new terminal that we just opened, Claude would also ask. And if you don't want Claude to ask you too much, you can choose a second option as well. Don't ask again for Python 3 commands. For any of the questions I selected have images. because I also want to demo how to generate the HTML files for the images. Doesn't seem like it. Oh, it does. It does have images. Yes. Okay, so over here, Claude actually output all the variations of all the exercise into one single JSON file. That's not what we want. We want one JSON file containing all variations of every exercise that we selected, right? So now I'm going to ask Claude to split the content of the file that it store all the variations into individual files. Claude decided to store all of the individual JSON files into this folder called exercise variations. So what we want to do is we want to move it outside of this folder, even though honestly it doesn't really matter, but just so that we're consistent with the process, I want all the individual JSON files to be outside of the folder. Okay, so now that the variations for 11E1 are in good shape, I will now run the Math Visual HTML generator agent to produce the HTML files for the images. Okay, so over here, you might notice that I'm running the same command twice, and that's because I noticed that Claude is using the question variation generator agent instead of the visual HTML generator. That's why I'm retyping the command. Okay, so I noticed that Claude is complaining there's no visual HTML generator agent yet. So that means when I clone this Git repo, the agents are not already installed yet. So I have to now create them again. Okay, so here the HTML files are actually outside of NumiScraper. I don't like that, so I personally want to store all the HTML files in a folder called HTML inside NumiScraper. So that's what I will be doing. And you'll see that I run some of the commands here, which is not really important because you can always just use your mouse to select all the files and then move it to the folder if you don't like to work with the terminal, run all the commands. And then the next part is to see the content of the HTML file, what it actually displays. So you would need to open your Finder, go to the HTML folder, right, and then just click on an HTML file. It will launch that file to Safari or your default browser. Then you'll be able to see the content or the visual components. Okay, next part is just checking to make sure that whatever is displayed by the HTML file matches with the details in the JSON variations. Right, so for variation 1, we can see, okay, it's asking for the sum of 4 plus 5, and that's exactly what we have here. And this is a Unicode character, so I just change it by changing all currents to minus. Okay, inspect element is meant to check to make sure that this single HTML files contain all the necessary images of that variation. So here I'm checking, yep, the second variation, and it looks good. So this is the command for you to upload the files that you created, whether it's JSON file or HTML files, to GitHub. This step is optional. Like if you don't feel comfortable with these commands, you can let me know and then we'll hop on a meeting and then I'll walk you through the process. So there are 3 main commands. You have to add, and then you commit, and then you push. And that is an example of uploading one single file, JSON, and then the HTML accompanying files, right? I'm going to do another example by uploading the remaining files that I created. So the structure is pretty simple. You do git add, and then you list out the names of the files. And then same idea, git add, and then git commit, and then git push. Okay, so now how do we know that the upload was successful? You go to the Git repo and go to the branch that you work on, and you should see the most updated files, all the files that you uploaded from your local machine on the Git repo. And yeah, that's it.